I'm sorry to tell you, but…
What?
I gasped as I heard the reality from the police. My body recoiled, refusing to accept the facts I had just heard. I couldn't believe my brother-in-law, Dawson, and my precious daughter, Eliza, had tried to commit suicide using charcoal briquettes. Dawson, who was kind to a fault, and Eliza, who was so easygoing. And then there was me. We may have been an unconventional family, but I thought we were a normal one.
It's my fault. If only I had been stronger.
Frustrated with my weak body and timid nature, I blamed myself. I must have been the one who drove Eliza to desperation. But why would Dawson attempt suicide with Eliza? There could only be one reason. That nasty woman must have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Their daily interactions made it clear. Dawson had always been at that woman's beck and call. Before talking everything to the police, I needed to confront that woman myself and make her confess. Fueled by an unprecedented level of anger, I began preparing for revenge. My name is Nora, and I'm 45 years old. My misfortune began 3 years ago. My beloved husband, Ronald, passed away from a stroke. At the time, our daughter Eliza had just turned 14. I remember how we held each other and cried all night after the funeral. What are we going to do now? Mom, do you think we can survive? It's going to be okay. I'll figure something out, I promise. We had relied entirely on my husband for our livelihood. I had always been physically weak, making it difficult for me to work like others. It was only natural for Eliza to feel anxious. Honestly, I was just as worried. I had only worked part-time jobs during my student days and had hardly any real work experience. I wondered if I could support her and myself going forward. One day, as I was feeling disheartened, I received a phone call from someone.
Hi, Nora. It's Dawson. I was wondering how you were doing.
Oh, hi Dawson. It's been a while. The call was from my brother-in-law, Dawson. Having just lost his brother, I'm sure his wounds were deep too. Even so, he had reached out to check on us, worried about what we were going through. That weekend, Dawson visited our home and made an unexpected proposal.
Why don't the three of us live together from now on? It would make things easier for you.
What? Are you sure?
Of course. I think Ronald would be worried about you and Eliza from heaven. It would be tough for you to send Eliza to college on just your income alone, right? Dawson.
Nothing could have been more reassuring. Eliza and I accepted Dawson's proposal and decided to live together. Dawson worked at an advertising agency, and while he didn't earn as much as my husband had at a trading company, he still made a decent living. I planned to work part-time as well, so our lives were bound to become much more comfortable. Just as I had thought, once we began living together, our lives became far more manageable.
This is great. I can be a bit of a slob, I'll admit, but with you and Eliza handling the housework, I can focus more on my job.
I was worried about getting by on just my income, so this is a huge help.
Thank you, Dawson. I'll do my best with both my studies and helping out around the house. Yeah. Let's work together, the three of us.
However, the pleasant living arrangement was short-lived. As Dawson grew accustomed to having Eliza and me around, he gradually began to reveal his true nature. He was a violent drunk, loved gambling, and often stayed out late on weekends. On top of that, he was a real womanizer with wandering hands. He would sometimes grope Eliza's and my behinds as we passed by.
Hey! Cut it out! You're drunk again, aren't you? Don't be such a prude. Eliza lets me touch her without complaining. Stop putting your hands on her.
Eliza started avoiding Dawson. She said she hated having him touch her body. She's a quiet girl and understands the debt we owe him. If he were to press her hard, she'd probably have a tough time refusing. I couldn't help but think I had made a terrible mistake. At some point, Dawson's demeanor began to change. He became much more violent and aggressive than before. I remember him mumbling to himself, looking frightened.
Damn it. This wasn't supposed to happen. It's all that woman's fault.
I had no idea who that woman he was referring to could be. I knew nothing about his social life, and I had no way of finding out. Then one day, I made a startling discovery on the side of Dawson's head.
Dawson, your head. Huh? Oh. What the? Damn it. Why is this happening? Son of a bitch.
There was a circular bald spot on his head. He must have been under an incredible amount of stress. I couldn't help but feel terrified. I imagined Dawson taking out that stress on Eliza and me. Pushed to the brink of developing stress-induced alopecia, he eventually quit his job. When I asked if he had found a new one, he said he had quit without having anything else lined up.
What choice did I have? Do you want me to go even balder? I'm not blaming you. I don't think you'll have any trouble finding a new job. Please, just don't get angry.
But he didn't start job hunting right away. He said he had no intention of working until his alopecia was completely healed. Around that time, his attitude became much rougher than before. On top of that, he became far more slovenly, repeatedly exasperating Eliza and me.
Come on. Please don't walk around naked after getting out of the bath. What did you say? This is my house too. I can dress however I want. But it's really troubling. Eliza's at a delicate age, so please be considerate. Why do I have to put up with so much?
Dawson became short-tempered. And every time he drank at home, he would mutter curses at that woman.
It's that woman's fault. It's not my fault. That woman set me up.
He kept repeating that. I thought the woman pushing Dawson to the edge must be a female coworker. But maybe that wasn't the case. After all, he was still suffering even after quitting his job. Who on earth could that woman be? Dawson wouldn't tell me when I asked. Then one day, when I came home from work, I saw an unfamiliar pair of women's shoes by the front door. The aroma of a seemingly delicious meal wafted from inside. Eliza should still be at school, so why? As I entered the kitchen dining area, I found a slender woman standing there, cooking. Dawson was sitting quietly at the table. His eyes were darting around as he looked at me. The woman spoke up before he could.
You must be Nora? Nice to meet you. I'm Beverly, your new next-door neighbor.
Oh, nice to meet you too. But why are you cooking?
Dawson said he was hungry, so I borrowed your kitchen. I used to work with him at his previous job. I hope we can get along well from now on.
Yes, of course. The pleasure is all mine. Beverly said she would leave the cooking to me and go home. Of course, I didn't mind, but what surprised me was Beverly's behavior after that. Beverly wrapped her arm around Dawson's neck and whispered something to him, her lips almost touching his earlobe. Dawson's reaction was to turn deathly pale and start trembling all over.
Dawson! What's wrong? Dawson! He was harassed at his previous workplace. Poor thing. I'm sure that must have brought back memories for him. Take good care of him, okay?
Well then, see you around. And with that, Nora left. As she walked out, Dawson let out an enormously deep sigh. He must have been incredibly tense. That woman tormenting him had to be her. But he was so terrified that no matter what I asked, he wouldn't divulge any details. He seemed completely dominated by fear. For the sake of our future, I thought it might be best to do something about it. With that in mind, I started racking my brain for ideas. A few months had passed since Beverly moved in next door. During this time, he had been disturbingly docile. You could say he was constantly distracted, his mind elsewhere. He often didn't notice when I spoke to him, and he still made no effort to find a new job. I think I was so preoccupied with Dawson that I failed to notice a change in my precious only daughter. One day, Eliza uncharacteristically complained to me about feeling unwell. "I feel kind of feverish. I might have caught a cold." "Oh, really? Maybe you should stay home from school." It wasn't the season for colds to be going around, so what could it be? A thought suddenly occurred to me, and I checked Eliza's body, feeling puzzled. The symptoms Eliza was describing were the same as when I had first become pregnant with her. An unpleasant notion raced through my mind. I considered the possibility that Dawson had made a move on Eliza. Our Eliza is timid. It would be understandable if she couldn't refuse him. "Hey, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but Eliza, did you by any chance do that kind of thing with someone? Could there be a baby in your belly?"
Oh, that's...
Eliza. What? Really? Tell me. Who was it? I won't get mad. Eliza closed her mouth, on the verge of tears. She clearly didn't want to say. I asked her this and that, but to no avail. In any case, it seemed certain that she had engaged in that kind of act with someone. I took the still silent Eliza to the gynecologist. The test results confirmed that Eliza was indeed pregnant. No matter how many times I asked who the father was, Eliza wouldn't answer. Her head was bowed, her lips sealed. She must have had a strong reason for not wanting to tell me, or for being unable to. In other words, the other party wasn't someone ordinary. This wasn't a happy pregnancy. The thought of my Eliza going through something like this. It pained me as if it were happening to me. A few days later, in the evening, I received a call on my cell phone as I was coming home from work. The call persistently came from an unknown number, so I tentatively answered it and found that it was the police. They told me to come to the police station in the city immediately, so I hailed a taxi and went straight there. Apparently, Dawson had attempted suicide together with Eliza.
What? Where are they now? Are they safe? Please tell me.
Please calm down. They're both in the hospital now. It seemed that Dawson and Eliza had tried to kill themselves using charcoal briquettes. However, the car they used wasn't sealed properly, and they were in a convenience store parking lot. Moreover, it was still light out, so someone noticed something was wrong and quickly came to their aid.
So their lives aren't in danger, then?
Well, yes, but I'm afraid to say that this incident doesn't appear to be a simple suicide attempt. There are signs that Eliza was assaulted by a group.
What?
My body recoiled, refusing to accept the facts I had just heard. Assaulted by a group. How could this happen to her? Was Dawson involved? But why would he attempt suicide? Could it be that he was tormented by a guilty conscience? How was Dawson involved in the assault? I couldn't shake the nausea. How did things end up like this? It's my fault. If only I had been stronger. Frustrated with my weak body and timid nature, I blamed myself. I must have been the one who drove her to desperation. But why would Dawson attempt suicide with Eliza? There could only be one reason. That woman must have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Their daily interactions made it clear. Dawson seemed unable to defy that woman. Before talking to the police, I needed to confront that woman myself and make her confess. Fueled by an unprecedented level of anger, I began preparing for revenge. I investigated everything I possibly could about that neighbor, Beverly. Her background, personality, family, relationships, absolutely everything. As a result, I learned that she was now completely alone in the world. She had apparently quit the company she worked for. I also discovered that she had gotten divorced a few years ago. The reason for the divorce was her infidelity. When I asked her former colleagues, they gave me incredibly detailed information. Beverly was a terribly wicked woman. She was a frightening woman who repeatedly found men she could use and sucked them dry to the bone. After taking every precaution I could, I called Beverly out to a cafe during the day. She arrived with a serene smile on her face. "Long time no see. Did you wait long? What can I do for you?"
Don't play dumb. You're the one who drove Dawson and Eliza to suicide, aren't you?
Suicide? Drove them to it? What are you talking about?
Dawson and Eliza tried to kill themselves with charcoal.
The surprise on Beverly's face was so feigned it made me sick. She knew everything, yet how long did she intend to keep up this act? She had an expression that said she knew nothing and was completely uninvolved. Did she not understand how devastated and angry I was, having nearly lost my precious Eliza?
Stop playing dumb. I know all about it. You were exploiting his weaknesses, weren't you? You were manipulating him, right?
Wait, calm down. I really have no idea what you're talking about.
Is that so? Then shall I jog your memory?
I turned my smartphone screen toward Beverly. The footage shown was from our living room. It was a hidden camera recording, so a potted plant was obstructing the view. However, it was clear who was doing what and where. Beverly had Dawson on all fours, kicking his rear over and over. I couldn't see her expression, but I could tell she was angry.
You ugly piece of trash. Worthless scum. Apologize for being born.
She was shouting those words. Dawson was desperately apologizing. He was crying in a pathetic voice. Just like a child.
I had everything investigated. Dawson borrowed money from you, didn't he? A considerable amount, at that. Isn't that right? Say something.
Even if you say that, I don't know what you're. He and I simply had a relationship where we enjoyed slightly abnormal play. It has nothing to do with you, does it?
Yes, you're right. I'm just his housemate. We weren't married or anything, so I suppose I have no right to interfere with your tastes.
Then, don't complain about it. I cut Beverly off. That's not what I wanted to ask about now. I was trying to confirm how you had cornered him.
Just answer my question. You lent money to Dawson, right? But that money wasn't yours. Isn't that true? What? How do you know that?
I played another video for her to see. I had set up more than one hidden camera. I had been suspicious of Beverly ever since she moved in. I wanted to find out what kind of interactions Dawson and Beverly were having while I was away. That's why I had installed a hidden camera in every room. In the video, Dawson was forced to sit in front of Beverly and was slapped repeatedly. There was no doubt that she was responsible for his alopecia areata. Why was he subjected to this treatment? The reason he couldn't defy Beverly was the existence of the debt.
Look, this scene here. You say, if you don't pay back the money soon, those guys will make you suffer. Those guys are the gangs, right? Huh? Where's the evidence of that? I told you, it's pointless to play dumb. I was worried about Eliza, so I was wary of him too.
I tried to figure out what he was afraid of. So, even though I knew it was wrong, I secretly searched his room. As a result, I found out that Dawson had a large debt. The amount was about $50,000. It was all debt Dawson had incurred from gambling.
You lent money to Dawson, but it wasn't actually your money, it was the gang's money. He unknowingly borrowed it, and then he was put through hell. That's how it is, right?
You talk as if you saw it all.
There's no evidence that I have ties to the gang.
Don't say such scandalous things. I'm terribly offended.
I'm the one who's offended. How long do you intend to feign ignorance?
I played a third video. This location wasn't inside the house. It was from the security camera at the grocery store where I work. The video showed Beverly and another man who was tall and too thin. His name was supposed to be Ariel, and they seemed very close.
This man is Ariel, right? He's with the gang, isn't he? How do you know about that? Obviously, because I investigated. You see, I work stocking shelves at that grocery store. I had noticed that you sometimes shopped there. I also knew that you would come with a man sometimes. I was shocked when I looked into it. He was with a gang.
In other words, Beverly was an underling of the gang. Her role was to trap targeted men. She would approach them, saying she would lend them money if they were in trouble, immobilize them, and then pressure them strongly.
If you can't pay back the money, do as I say.
Dawson had probably started living with us out of pure goodwill at first. However, his demeanor changed partway through. It was because she demanded repayment of the debt. He learned that she had ties to the gang and began living in fear of her shadow. Eventually, he was driven to the point of developing alopecia areata and quit his job as a way to escape from her. Even so, she followed him. Dawson must have been terrified when he found out she had moved in next door.
Dawson, who was up to his ears in gambling debt, had no choice but to listen to you and your gang connections. Isn't that right? Give me an honest answer already.
And if I say it is? So?
You're the worst. And then you people ordered him to hand over Eliza, didn't you?
I wasn't the one who gave the order. It was Ariel. If you want to hold a grudge, hold it against him.
You're just as guilty. Because of you people, Eliza was violated and even got pregnant with some stranger's child. Dawson was so tormented by this that he tried to commit suicide with charcoal along with Eliza. It's all written right here.
Beverly's eyes widened when she saw the paper I pulled out. That's right, he had left me a note in his room. The letter detailed how she had been cornering him. He had written frankly about everything, including the debt and his fear of the gang.
The night I left the two of them in the hospital and returned to the room, I searched his room. And I found this note left on his desk. In the letter, he apologized to me over and over. He was sorry for putting her through this.
Beverly stammered.
Then, it's not my fault that Eliza was passed around by man. I won't accept that you bear no responsibility whatsoever. It's because you drove Dawson into a corner. I will never forgive you. Never.
It was the first time I had ever been this angry at someone. This woman and her gang had wounded my precious Eliza's heart and body. How sad and painful it must have been for her. She must have wanted to talk to me about it. But she couldn't. She didn't want me to worry. Poor thing, truly. Eliza had tried to leave this world as he told her to.
You're the one who drove them to suicide too, aren't you? Answer. Beverly. I don't know. I didn't do anything like that. What proof do you have? I do have proof. Here, read the last part of this note. It says, from now on, hand Eliza over as many times as they want. If you don't like it, go apologize to her in the afterlife. That's what it says he was told. Well, you cornered Dawson by saying that, didn't you? Didn't you? Oh, but I never thought they would actually commit suicide.
Beverly finally admitted her involvement. Of course, even if she hadn't admitted it herself, there was evidence. If I examined all the audio from the hidden cameras, I could have verified her statements. But there was meaning in making Beverly confess herself. I took a voice recorder out of my handbag and showed it to her.
I recorded our entire exchange just now. I'm going to submit this to the police. Wait a minute. Isn't that unfair? Recording me. You have no right to criticize anyone. Do you truly understand the gravity of what you've done? Do you feel even the slightest remorse?
At my shout, all the customers in the store turned to look at us. Of course, this situation was going according to my plan too. Surrounded by people, Beverly couldn't escape. When I said I would submit evidence to the police, Beverly's resolve completely crumbled.
I'm sorry. I think I really did a terrible thing. I regret it, and I swear I'll never do it again. I want to sit in front of Eliza's grave and apologize. So please, just don't tell the police. I'll do anything for you from now on. I'm afraid I have no use for a good-for-nothing woman like you. And my Eliza is still alive. She hasn't woken up yet, though. Don't go sending her to the grave without permission, okay?
Thanks to the quick discovery, Dawson is still alive as well. If they regain consciousness, both of them will surely testify. They'll say that Beverly was a gang underling and that she drove them to attempt suicide. She has nowhere left to run now. She seemed to realize this too, and her voice finally broke into sobs. It's Ariel's fault. I'm a victim too. He used me.
Used you? How so?
The same as Dawson. He immobilized me with debt. He threatened to drown my parents in the sea if I didn't do as he said, so I had no choice but to.
More nonsense. Didn't I say I investigated everything? Beverly, I looked into you too. Your parents passed away a long time ago, right? It's a lie that this person threatened you. Isn't it?
Beverly hung her head, her face beet red. She must have been terribly embarrassed about having her lie exposed so easily. She was a woman who lied as easily as she breathed. I braced myself. I mustn't believe this woman's words or tears, as they were surely mixed with lies.
You actively cooperated with Ariel. You're the one who told him about Eliza, aren't you?
That may be true. I don't remember very well, but
that's enough. The police can verify the rest. Right?
At my call, the men in the seats behind us turned around. They were all police officers. All three of them were glaring at Beverly with sharp eyes. She turned pale when they showed her their police badges. She probably never thought I was cooperating with the police. Ms. Beverly, please come with us to the station. Oh, and don't think about trying to run. If you do, the charges against you might become more severe.
What you committed was the crime of inciting suicide. It's not a lie. That crime really exists. Apparently, the statutory penalty for encouraging someone to take their own life is imprisonment. With work or imprisonment without work for not less than 6 months but not more than 7 years.
The officers grabbed the trembling Beverly. She seemed to have finally given up. She hung her head dejectedly. Beverly was taken to the police station, and her crimes were later confirmed. She was also charged for handing a minor over to a gang. In the end, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Both Dawson and Eliza survived, but they could have easily died if things had gone slightly differently. It's only natural that Beverly's crimes, which drove them to that state, would be severe. She apparently answered all of the police's questions honestly. She must have realized that making excuses was pointless. It was pathetic. 5 years later, what kind of life did Beverly lead after being released from prison? I heard about it secondhand from an acquaintance. She moved to a small town in Boston and started living there alone. Her job was in the sex industry at a pub. She must have been aware that such work suited her. But her rotten true nature hadn't been fixed by her time in prison. She made a move on a male customer. Unfortunately for her, that man happened to be someone important to the owner of the pub. The furious madam banished Beverly, and she could never work at that establishment again. To make matters worse, the owner had connections to the gang organization that controlled the area. Her anger at having her important man touched was intense, and Beverly became a wanted woman. In a small town with nowhere to turn to, Beverly had no way to escape. She was found pretending not to be home in her apartment and taken away. One can imagine what the gang members did to her. She was violated by the men for nearly a week straight and left in tatters. Afterward, she was abandoned even by the gang and wandered the town like a worn-out rag. With no money and no one to turn to, she ended up among the homeless. There, she was repeatedly violated again and is said to still be passed around endlessly. The one who told me this was that gang member named Ariel. Apparently, he secretly provided information to the police in exchange for avoiding prison time. He was pleased that he managed to stay out of jail. And he had come to tell me about Beverly's fate, as she had made me suffer. Honestly, I can't forgive him either. After all, he's one of the group who did terrible things to my precious Eliza. However, the end that Beverly met, which he shared with me, was indeed good news for me. I thanked him and parted ways, telling him never to show his face again. Dawson and Eliza woke up about 3 months after the suicide attempt came to light. On the hospital bed, Dawson apologized to me over and over through tears. "I'm truly sorry. I'm so sorry." He kept apologizing. "Actually, I hated it the whole time. But I was scared. They told me to hand over Eliza, so I had no choice. I'm really sorry. Is Eliza alive?" "Yes, she's alive. She woke up before you and is receiving treatment in another room now. Fortunately, there were no lingering effects. You two were really lucky." "I see. I need to apologize to Eliza too. I did something truly inexcusable. I'm sincerely remorseful." My Eliza was surprisingly strong. It was Eliza who brought up wanting to have an abortion. She said there was no way she could raise a child right now. So, as much as she hated to, she wanted to send the baby back to heaven. "I really wish I could raise the child myself, but it can't be helped." "That's right. Please, don't blame yourself. You did nothing wrong, Eliza." "You're right. I'm okay. And I can't really blame Dawson either. When he handed me over to the Nang, he resisted at the very end. He said, 'No, this isn't right. Please, at least spare her.'" "Is that so?" "He didn't say anything about that. It was because he showed that attitude that she accepted the idea of suicide. He apologized for putting her through such a painful experience. He apparently told her, 'Let's go to heaven together so we don't cause trouble for Nora.' Idiots. What heaven! No matter what happens to you, you're still my precious Eliza. Don't ever try something stupid like suicide again, you hear me?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Mom, you seem to have gotten stronger somehow.
Maybe so. It might be because I went through so much pain. I want to be discharged soon and get back to a normal life. After that, I started living with Eliza and Dawson again, the three of us together. Some people might be surprised, wondering how I could live with him after everything. This is probably a feeling that only we who experienced it can understand. The resentment toward him still remains in my heart, but the anger is mostly gone now. He too was a victim, and I felt more pity for him than anything else. Since then, he has completely quit drinking and gambling and is working diligently. We were all tossed about by a terrible fate and suffered, all three of us. But it's because we're those three that I believe we can live on together, supporting each other. My mind was already swelling with the idea of living with my son, Thomas.
There should be no problem using the spare room as a bedroom for Thomas and his wife, Jessica.
Just then, I received a call from my daughter, Dorothy, on my mobile phone. Thomas called me.
He's already contacted you too.
That means he must have called you as well, Mom.
Yes, he did, about 10 minutes ago. Thomas, who hasn't reached out in 18 years, said he's okay with living with me. It seems Thomas has grown up without me realizing.
Then, on the other end of the phone, Dorothy sighed. Thomas has no intention of taking care of you, Mom. Before calling you, Mom, he called me. Guess what he said? He asked if he could live with me.
Thomas told me he wanted to live with me. Jessica agreed as well.
That's definitely a lie. He only turned to you because I refused. Our dream of living together was falling apart. The dream of living together, which had been growing inside me, was crumbling apart. I just got a call from Thomas saying he's going to live with you, and he sounded so excited. He plans to live there without working. And I overheard Jessica laughing in the background, saying they've got themselves a good housekeeper now. There's no way people like that will take care of you, Mom. My inflated expectations turned to hatred.
What a predicament. I wonder if there's any way to get Thomas and Jessica to leave.
I decided to seek advice from Dorothy. My name is Mary. I'm just an ordinary housewife you'd find anywhere. I lost my husband, Matthew, last year after living together for many years. Currently, I live alone in the suburbs of the city. Our children have moved out, and we had planned to enjoy a leisurely life together after retirement, but Matthew passed away suddenly. The rooms felt spacious for one, contrary to their actual size. And I felt the loneliness of suddenly having no one to talk to. Going shopping for distractions, I'd meet familiar store clerks and friends to chat with. But even taking a short walk around the neighborhood was a struggle for me. After fracturing my leg in a fall indoors in my mid-50s, I've been unable to walk without a cane. Moreover, my apartment is quite old, necessitating the use of stairs to move in and out, which is challenging since my room is on the 5th floor. This makes daily climbs up and down the stairs quite difficult with my mobility issues. Consequently, I find myself increasingly confined to my room. Fortunately, I have the inheritance Matthew left behind, so I won't struggle financially for the time being, but I'm more worried about becoming mentally isolated. Dorothy visits once a week to check on me. She runs a home-based restaurant and brings leftovers to share, which brightens my mood a bit, but I feel lonely again once she leaves. I've had no contact with my son, Thomas, since he left home after graduating high school. And I have no idea where he is or what he's doing. I had resigned myself to the fact that he's always been that way and wouldn't likely visit. Then, seeing an advertisement for a real estate agent in the newspaper, I thought it might be time to move into a barrier-free home. A barrier-free home would eliminate the need for stairs, making outings, including shopping, much easier. A small house would suffice, affordable with Matthew's inheritance. After all, it would only be me, an elderly woman, living there, so a compact space is all I need. I decided to visit a real estate agent. What surprised me recently was the abundance of vacant homes, more than I had imagined. I knew from TV news that many properties were without buyers or renters, despite being livable. Some were equipped with ramps and handrails for barrier-free access. I thought it was a waste, but according to the real estate agent, these homes were often vacated by elderly individuals who moved to facilities soon after renovations. The size and number of rooms were just right for me, and the purchase price was about 80% of what I had expected. Plus, the location, within walking distance to supermarkets and parks, encouraged me. A light walk would be possible, promising a healthier retirement life than staying cooped up at home. I began to fantasize about installing playground equipment for Dorothy's grandchildren to play with if she ever had any.
How about it? I've decided. This is the place.
I decided to buy that house. A few days later, Thomas, who hadn't contacted me in 18 years, finally called. My heart fluttered when I saw Thomas's name on the screen. Ah, good. Your phone number hasn't changed. Though it was over the phone, Thomas's voice sounded different, but the way he spoke was unmistakably Thomas. Thomas, where have you been and what have you been doing all this time? Before I could express my joy at hearing Thomas's voice after so long, my anger burst forth. Thomas responded in a calm tone, seemingly unfazed by my scolding. Long time no see. How have you been recently? He asked as if we had only spoken a few months ago.
I've been doing well. How about you, Thomas? Are you doing okay?
I'm getting by. How about you, Mom? Any changes recently? Thomas lightly dodged my question, attempting to inquire about my recent life.
I finally get to hear your voice after so long, so let's talk more calmly. I want to know more about you, Thomas.
Oh, sorry. So, any changes recently? Thomas either listened or didn't, insisting on knowing about my recent life.
Thomas, I heard you married a woman named Jessica?
There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone.
How did you know? Who told you? I heard it from Anthony, Thomas's classmate.
Anthony, huh? Yeah, I did. But, more importantly, how are you doing? I was frustrated by Thomas's reluctance to talk about himself. But hearing Thomas's voice for the first time in 18 years made me tear up. Happy that he was alive and well, regardless of his whereabouts.
If you got married, you should have told me properly. Come visit sometime and introduce Jessica, okay?
I said in a scolding tone, hiding my happiness from Thomas. Got it. But how are you, Mom? Are you managing okay on your own? I wondered why he avoided talking about himself. Thomas was keen to know about my life, but refused to talk about his own, making it feel like he was avoiding the subject. Is everything not going well? What are you working as? Can you make ends meet? I work part-time, but I'm getting by. Tell me more about you, Mom. Since Thomas was so fixated on my life, I decided to give in and tell him about my current plans.
Actually, I'm thinking of moving from my current house to a barrier-free detached house.
So, that story was true. I could sense excitement in Thomas's voice. What kind of house is it? It's bigger than the one you're living in now, right? How big is it? How many rooms does it have? How big is the yard? Thomas bombarded me with questions, which surprised me.
Calm down, Thomas. What's gotten into you?
Then, Thomas's tone softened as if he had come to his senses. No, it's nothing. Don't worry about anything, Mom. I was concerned by Thomas's phrasing. And the sudden call after 18 years of silence, especially his keen interest in the new property I was purchasing.
Are you really okay? Is there something you're worried about?
Thomas had always been like this since he was a child. Avoiding direct topics and subtly checking on my situation when he thought he might be in trouble. Then reluctantly telling the truth when the time was right. I couldn't help feeling anxious that Thomas hadn't grown up even now. I'm really okay. There's nothing for you to worry about with me. Don't worry about anything. Thank you, Mom. I chose to take Thomas's words of gratitude at face value. Above all, I was happy that Thomas was alive and well.
Come visit sometimes. Bring Jessica along. If you let me know in advance, I'll prepare a meal and wait for you.
About that. Thomas hesitated to continue. I sensed that Thomas's true feelings would be revealed in his next words.
Speak up if you have something to say.
We're thinking about living with you, Mom. At those words, my heart leaped. Even though Dorothy comes to visit once a week, it's lonely without someone around. The idea that Thomas proposed living together was a joy for me.
Really? What does Jessica say? Is she okay with it?
Hearing about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict being common, I couldn't deny the possibility of Jessica being against it even if Thomas was fine. But Thomas confidently assured me there was no need to worry. Jessica's okay with living with you too. You know, given your age, it would be tough on you to be alone, right? Thomas and Jessica must be worried about me getting older. Their kindness brought me to tears. Leave your care to us. We want to make up for leaving Mom alone for 18 years.
It means a lot to hear you say that. Are you sure, Thomas?
Of course. It was Jessica's idea, actually. She wants to take care of you, Mom, so don't worry. Saying that, Thomas laughed on the phone, but I felt uneasy. I couldn't quite explain it, but something about Thomas's tone seemed too cheerful. Yet, I chose to interpret it as happiness about our living together. After hanging up the call with Thomas, my mind was already filled with plans for our life together. I imagined the layout of the new house we planned to buy.
The spare bedroom could be for Thomas and Jessica, no problem.
Losing Matthew and not having anyone to talk to, I often found myself talking aloud. But I didn't feel lonely now. Thomas had said he was okay with living together. And so had Jessica. I couldn't ask for more happiness. Thinking about them taking care of me in my old age, and if Thomas and Jessica had children, the house would be lively and fun. There's a farm nearby that can be rented, so a family garden might be a good idea for weekends. My positive daydreaming just kept expanding. Then, my mobile phone rang again. It was from Dorothy.
I wonder if Dorothy wants to live with us too, following Thomas. What would we do if that happened? The house would be too small.
Smiling at my predicament, I answered the phone. Mom, I just got a call from Thomas.
What's up? Did you already talk to Thomas?
I hoped to surprise Dorothy by mentioning Thomas's call, so I was a bit disappointed. Thomas had called Dorothy before me. Thomas called you too, huh?
Yes. About 10 minutes ago. He said he's okay with living together after not contacting us for 18 years. Thomas has grown up without me knowing.
I couldn't help but express my happiness. Then, Dorothy sighed deeply on the other end. So that's what this is about.
What's wrong? Did you want to live with us too?
It's not about that. It's about Thomas. He has no intention of taking care of you, Mom.
What do you mean?
Dorothy sounded a bit irritated, but she took a deep breath to calm down before speaking slowly. Before he called you, he called me. Guess what he said? If he could live with us.
What do you mean? Thomas said he wanted to live with me. Jessica agreed too.
That's a lie. There's no way he's thinking about living with both me and you at the same time. Thinking calmly, Dorothy's words made sense. Thomas's story was contradictory. Yet, I couldn't let go of the hope for living with Thomas.
Wait. I'll call Thomas again and find out what's going on.
It's useless. He'll just talk his way out of it with some flimsy excuse again. Listen, Mom, you absolutely must not get involved with him. He'll sweet-talk you and you'll end up being deceived. Dorothy stopped me with an unusually stern tone. I was at a loss for words in response to Dorothy's attitude, which allowed for such harsh criticism of Thomas. He's probably struggling with living expenses, so he thought about living at my place first. But after I refused, he reluctantly turned to you. Dorothy regained her composure and spoke to me in a calm manner, as if advising me. I was beginning to think something was off with Thomas, too. He never talked about his own situation, but bombarded me with questions about mine, especially about buying a new house. In my joy at the thought of living with Thomas, I might have been all too ready to be duped, despite my doubts. It seems Thomas has just gotten better at lying, not that he had a change of heart. The dream of a happy life surrounded by family that had grown in my mind crumbled to pieces. I got a call from him just now about living with you, and he sounded way too pleased about it. He plans to live there without working. Dorothy went on to share some shocking truths Jessica had let slip. And I overheard Jessica on the phone saying, "Now we have a good housekeeper." She was laughing about you like that. Hearing this, I was stunned. What on earth do Thomas and Jessica think of me? People with that kind of mindset could never take care of you, Mom. My hopes for Thomas had vanished. More than anything, I didn't want the no-good Thomas living in the new house I had put a deposit on. The betrayal turned into resentment over time.
It's troubling. Is there any way to kick Thomas and Jessica out?
I decided to seek Dorothy's reliable advice. Thomas, perhaps thinking his motives weren't yet apparent, texted me his phone number. The message came with it, "This is Jessica's number," implying that I would need it to communicate frequently with Jessica from now on. But having been informed by Dorothy of Thomas and Jessica's true intentions, I had completely abandoned any hope for Thomas. No matter how sweetly he might approach me now, I had no intention of welcoming him. Whether he apologizes in front of my house or whatever he does, as far as I'm concerned, I never had a son named Thomas. From now on, I've decided Dorothy is my only child and dear family. The precious things Matthew left behind won't be taken by Thomas and Jessica, who never cared about their parents. Not even when Matthew was hospitalized and sick did Thomas show his face or contact us. From now on, whatever happens to him, I couldn't care less. He's a stranger to me, not my son or anything. Presumably after getting my number from Thomas, Jessica began calling frequently, but I decided to completely ignore her. Getting irritated by the persistent calls every day, I finally decided to block her number. The call log showed 37 missed calls, but I never returned any, and the contact from Jessica ceased. She might still be trying to reach out, but having blocked her, it doesn't matter to me anymore. How have you been? Any contact from Thomas? Occasionally, Dorothy comes by after work with leftovers from the restaurant and checks in on me, but I just smile and shake my head.
There's no contact because I blocked the calls. It's been stuck at 37 missed calls. I wonder if their phone bill is the one that's really suffering?
I said, with a hint of sarcasm, and Dorothy laughed. About a month into my decision to ignore them, Dorothy's mobile phone began to ring. From Thomas. Mom, what should we do? Apparently, Thomas had called Dorothy, deciding that Jessica was no longer an option.
I'll leave it up to your judgment. I am a bit curious about what's going on with them, though.
When I said this, Dorothy laughed and responded, I was thinking of ignoring them, but I'm actually quite curious to see what's become of them, too. Dorothy, with a broad smile, answered Thomas's call.
What's going on?
Instead of Thomas, it was Jessica's shouting voice that came through the phone. Screaming like a howling wolf, loud enough for me to hear from a distance. Directly exposed to the yelling, Dorothy quickly pulled the mobile phone away from her ear and calmly soothed Jessica like a zookeeper calming a wild animal. You don't need to shout. I can hear you just fine. It was my first time hearing Jessica's voice, and she seemed like a peculiar person for speaking to her husband's family with such a confrontational attitude. To be able to hurl such insults at a family you've never even met, you must be quite lacking in common sense. Dorothy, holding back laughter, retorted to Jessica's complaints. Jessica lowered her tone a bit, but her voice was still powerful enough to reach my ears.
Explain clearly what's going on. Why is nobody living there? We went to the new house we bought, and they say it hasn't been purchased yet.
Dorothy occasionally pulled the phone away from her ear, trying to make sense of the other side's argument.
Calm down, Jessica. You don't need to shout. I can hear you.
Put it on speakerphone. I want to listen too. I found this unusual character, Jessica, amusing and couldn't help but want to hear more.
Mom sure is curious.
Dorothy switched to speakerphone, and Jessica's screaming voice echoed throughout the room. I felt a momentary pang of guilt for possibly disturbing the neighbors, but figured everyone was likely out at this time of day and nobody was around. Besides, Jessica was the one bothering to call and complain at such an hour.
All right. I'll explain it to you in a way even you can understand, so listen carefully.
Then Dorothy began to slowly explain the method of retaliation we had employed over the last month.
Truth be told, that new house isn't actually Mom's property yet. We hadn't decided whether to buy that house yet. What do you mean? You said you were moving to a new place because of an inheritance. We tried to move our stuff in, but were stopped by the manager. The real estate agent showed up, and we even got scolded by the police.
Hearing Jessica's outcry about the police ordeal, Dorothy and I couldn't contain our laughter any longer and burst out laughing.
Hey, stop laughing. I can hear everything. You tricked us.
What are you talking about?
You two were the first to try and deceive Mom. Weren't you trying to ingratiate yourselves with Mom now that she's alone to move in?
Dorothy, appalled by Jessica's selfish reasoning, calmly countered. Indeed, I had planned to purchase that new house. But after learning of Thomas and Jessica's motives, I reconsidered. I consulted Dorothy about possibly canceling the purchase, and she informed me it could be canceled by forfeiting it.
So, that house was never actually purchased by Mom. Was that your idea? Don't interfere unnecessarily.
Hearing the growling on the other end, Dorothy once again pulled the mobile phone away from her ear.
Just tell me where Mary is. Don't mess around.
As I laughed off their demands and protests, Dorothy sharply retorted.
I wouldn't tell someone who calls Mom a housekeeper. How did you know? No, that must be a mistake. I don't remember saying anything that terrible. You might not be aware of it, but your voice is quite loud. If you speak that loudly, it can be heard even without directly holding the mobile phone.
Silenced by Dorothy's comeback, Jessica fell quiet. Then the voice changed to Thomas's. Dorothy, you know Mom's legs aren't what they used to be. We need to take care of her. I found it amusing to picture Thomas's desperate tone on the other end of the line. He was saying all the right things, but it was too late for any care to make a difference. If I hadn't realized Thomas and Jessica's plot by now, they would have surely treated me as a convenient housekeeper. Thomas's attitude, claiming such insincere intentions so blatantly, was both funny and a bit sad.
Anyway, you two have no business worrying about me or telling me anything.
With that, Dorothy dismissed Thomas with finality. We'll figure it out ourselves. The call ended with Thomas hanging up angrily.
Was that the right thing to do? It's their own fault. Idiots like them won't learn unless they face the consequences,
Dorothy said, smiling triumphantly. A few days later, Dorothy came to visit my house with leftovers from the restaurant.
What's happened since then? Did Thomas and Jessica say anything?
I was curious about the continuation of the incident and asked Dorothy. Dorothy answers with a big smile. Plenty. Seems like they've gotten themselves into quite a mess. Dorothy shared with a full smile the current predicament of Thomas and Jessica. That afternoon, Thomas had called Dorothy pleading for help.
Please, Dorothy. We're family, help us.
Thomas was crying on the phone.
The truth is, we're being chased for debts.
Thomas and Jessica had planned to rely on my new home and wealth from the start, thinking they could live comfortably without working by quitting their part-time jobs. In other words, he currently has no money. Now, without any money, after I canceled the purchase of the new house, they moved into a rundown apartment nearby, but soon couldn't afford the rent and were evicted. Ordinarily, they might have returned to part-time work, but they chose an unexpected path. The two of them borrowed a large sum from dubious lenders in hopes of striking it rich through gambling. I could almost see Jessica's face, someone I had never met. We can't go back to part-time work now. We'll make a fortune from gambling and show them. Imagining Jessica saying such a line, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Thomas and Jessica, having gambled away borrowed money, were now on the run from debt collectors.
So, I told Thomas this. Never to involve you or me in their lives ever again.
Dorothy, you always have to deal with so much. I expressed my concern for Dorothy's troubles. Later, I decided to move into a care facility that Dorothy found for me. This way, Thomas and them won't be able to approach. But are you sure you won't be lonely, Mom? I smiled and shook my head.
You've done so well for me. And this hamburger is delicious.
Thank you. It's popular with the customers too. Dorothy would sometimes bring leftovers from the restaurant, so I never felt lonely. Mom, I have a suggestion. Dorothy began with a serious tone. My husband and I have been thinking about building a new house soon.
That sounds wonderful. I'm sure it will be a beautiful home.
As my eyes lit up, Dorothy took my hand and said, If it happens, would you like to help out at our store? Only if you're okay with it, of course. I was just getting tired of the same daily walks around the facility.
Don't underestimate me because I'm old. I can still do my part when needed.
You would say that, I knew it. So, it's decided then. We'll make sure there's plenty of space around the cash register so you can easily fit. The thought of starting work at the store fills me with so much anticipation that I can't help but smile. I still haven't been able to get in touch with Thomas and the others, but at this point, there's nothing I can do about it. Whatever happens to them, it has nothing to do with me. Watched over by my beloved Dorothy, I've sworn to myself that I'll live my life without worrying about Thomas anymore. Upon arriving at the Target high-rise apartment, I approached the concierge and was handed the keys to the room. Through the elevator reserved for the higher floors, I made my way to the top floor of the apartment.
Wow, this is lovely.
As the door opened, my sister-in-law, Laura, was the first to leap in, dancing around as she exclaimed,
"Let's get unpacking."
I called out, but no one offered to help. Predictable, yet it still irked me. The movers placed the boxes where directed, and I was left to unpack alone.
"I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storeroom."
My father-in-law, Harrison, and my mother-in-law, Rosalind, went ahead and decided who was getting which room. But I ignored them and continued my work.
"This room is really nice. It would make a great final home."
Good for us. My husband, Oliver, and the in-laws said to each other, all smiles.
"It feels like a dream to live in such a house,"
Laura said with her eyes brimming with tears. It might be time to reveal the truth.
"Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh?"
My name is Katrina. I'm a 32-year-old freelance illustrator. I used to work for a major publishing company, but went independent and now mainly take on projects from my former employer, while also starting to work as a children's book author. I married Oliver 2 years ago, and we began living together in the apartment I've been residing in. The reason we live in my house is that it's my property, and Oliver, who was renting elsewhere, moved in with me. My parents died in a car accident when I was young. Afterwards, I was raised by my grandparents, and after graduating from college and securing a job, I bought this apartment. The payment was made using the compensation and insurance money received from my parents' accident. My grandparents raised me without touching that money and gave it to me to use for myself when I graduated college. I bought this place because my grandparents entered a nursing home. They had reserved a spot in the nursing facility, intending to move in together after raising me, not wanting me to bear the burden of their care. After much thought, I decided to buy this convenient apartment, which was also close to the nursing home my grandparents were in. My grandparents said there were other things I could spend the money on, but to me, this was the best use. I have been living here for almost 10 years now. The 10 years I spent with my parents and the 10 years I spent with my grandparents are nearly equal. I've been living in this apartment a third of my life, and I have grown quite attached to this place. I met Oliver at a friend's wedding after party. He was a colleague of my friend's husband. We were of the same age and formed a group that started hanging out together. Over time, several couples formed from this group, and a few have married. And one of those couples was Oliver and I. Oliver was cheerful and seemed to brighten the room just by being there. From our first meeting, I was attracted to him. I admired his cheerful nature, something I lacked, and thought he was a wonderful person. However, that was only the face Oliver showed to the world, and I quickly learned about his other side after we got married. While Oliver was very gentlemanly during our courtship, he turned out to be the type who changes once the marriage is set. No, it was worse than that. After we got married, he said something unbelievable. "Since I'm living in your house, you should take care of the living expenses." "What do you mean?" "The expenses would be the same even if I weren't here, right? So, you should continue to cover them as you have been." I think that's how it should be. Indeed, my apartment was already paid off, with no mortgage remaining. However, there were still maintenance fees, a sinking fund for repairs, and property tax. And since we have a car, there's also the parking fee.
So, those are expenses you'd be paying even if I weren't here, right? That's true, but then there should be no problem with you continuing to pay them as usual.
His argument seemed reasonable at first glance, but was fundamentally flawed.
But Oliver, you're living here now, too. We agreed to split the living expenses. I'd really appreciate it if you could contribute.
When I said this, Oliver's eyes narrowed angrily.
You're so money-grubbing! I never thought you were that kind of woman.
I was stunned and speechless. To me, it was obvious that as a married couple, we would share our lives equally. I had naturally assumed we would split the expenses for our home.
I'm not saying I won't contribute anything. I'll definitely pay half for my part. But you own this house, right?
So, he meant since it's my property, I should bear the costs.
I'll pay for my own necessities, isn't that fair enough?
Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. In the beginning, Oliver did pay half the living expenses as promised. But only the half that I billed him for.
This month's electricity bill came to this amount. That seems quite high. You're probably wasting money working from home?
I had quit my job while dating Oliver and started working freelance. Though I occasionally went out for meetings and networking, most of my work was done from home.
It doesn't seem fair.
First, Oliver complained about the high utility bills.
Unfair? How so? Well, I work outside almost all day. And I'm supposed to pay for your electricity use while you work from home?
What a reasoning. I was too astounded to respond.
I only use a little when I come home to sleep.
So, I don't have to pay half, right? Following this logic, Oliver began paying only a minimal amount. The same went for gas and water bills. Still, I tolerated it. Sure, Oliver was only home for a short time. And having an extra person did significantly increase the utility bills. But it was impossible to calculate exactly how much each of us used. Despite his complaints, we did share the living expenses, so I silently accepted his reasoning. Looking back, I can't believe how foolish I was, but at the time, I thought it was necessary. I decided it was better to endure and keep our marital life peaceful than to fight over something trivial from the start. Aside from money issues, Oliver was as bright and fun as before we got married. Though the financial concern always lingered in the back of my mind, I didn't struggle to live without his contributions. And I valued our happy times more. But the supposed happiness began to feel increasingly precarious. More overtime today, they really need to get it together. Oliver started coming home later, sounding annoyed.
Are you okay with all this overtime? There's a guideline that working over a certain number of hours a month is dangerous. You don't understand. Those are just nominal figures. A good salesman isn't just working the hours logged on the time card.
Oliver said this disdainfully.
Katrina, you've had to pull all-nighters to meet deadlines, right? Yes, that's true. That's my point. Don't be fooled by just the apparent numbers.
I graduated from an art college and worked as an illustrator. So I really didn't know much about sales. Faced with his assertion, I had no choice but to believe him.
I understand. But please, don't overdo it.
I know. You're kind, Katrina. I won't push myself too hard. Oliver reassured me gently, embracing my shoulder. I tried to believe in Oliver's kindness forcefully, as if believing was the only way to keep my peace of mind. Gradually, I felt increasingly betrayed by Oliver over the year. They say people can react to sudden pain, but become desensitized to slow, incremental pain. By that point, Oliver's betrayals had accumulated significantly, yet I felt I was just enduring a little longer, spending my days pretending not to notice for the sake of peace. Then, a significant event occurred.
My family's coming over soon, is that okay?
One morning, Oliver suddenly mentioned this.
Harrison and Rosalind? And Laura too?
I had visited his family's home once before we married, for a family meeting. It was a small house in the countryside. It seemed to be a fairly old house, and every part of it was old, but my parents-in-law were living there. At that time, Laura had already moved out after getting married, so I wasn't able to meet her. We did message her, but as she couldn't come due to her schedule, but gave us a message, "Welcome to the family." Since we didn't have a wedding ceremony and only took photos, that was the only time I met his parents. Of course, I never had a chance to meet Laura. Our friends held a party for us to congratulate, but I still hadn't met Oliver's relatives. As I didn't have much interaction with my own relatives, and I did not find it so strange. Now, suddenly, his parents and Laura were coming to visit. It wasn't odd for them to want to see how we were doing after a year of marriage. Without any doubt, I agreed to Oliver's words. A week later, as promised, the in-laws came to our house. "This is your place? It's not very big, is it?" That was the first thing they said as they entered our home. Of course, it's not big. This house was originally bought for me to live in alone. It has 3 rooms and a spacious living dining area. One room is almost used as a storage, and the remaining rooms served as my office and bedroom. When Oliver started living with me, he wanted a space to work from home, so I gave up my office for Oliver's study. And now I work in the living room. It's spacious enough for 2 people to live without any inconvenience. As I was thinking this, Laura, whom I was meeting for the first time after Rosalind, entered the house. "You're right, it's smaller than I thought. Are we going to live here together?" "It's small, but bear with it. They say any place becomes comfortable if you live in it." "Well, it's better than nothing. I'll manage to live here." "How long do they intend to stay?" As I pondered vaguely, Oliver commanded me with an irritated voice.
Hey, what are you dozing off for? Hurry up and carry in my parents' luggage."
"What? Oh, sorry. Which ones are their luggage?" I thought it would be just enough luggage for a short stay, maybe a duffel bag. But when I looked inside the entrance, I couldn't find anything.
"What are you looking at? It's outside."
Rushing to the entrance, I saw about 10 cardboard boxes piled up in the hallway. Cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house? I didn't understand the meaning, but leaving such things in the hallway would bother other residents. Fortunately, none of the boxes were too heavy, and I somehow managed to bring all of them into the living room by myself. Since it's a living dining area, it's quite spacious. Although it's obstructive, stacking them up secured enough space to place them. During this time, Oliver and the in-laws were sitting and talking.
"Make coffee once you're done with the luggage. Hurry up, everyone is tired."
I couldn't think properly due to the situation and moved reflexively to Oliver's words. "You really are so inconsiderate. I'm worried about our future."
"I'll sleep in this room."
While I was cluelessly making coffee, Laura declared our bedroom as her room. "Ah, that's fine. I'll clean up the storage with Mom, and when we're done, we'll sleep together."
"It'll be nice to sleep with Oliver after a long time."
Sleeping closely with family, how nice. Oliver and his parents acted as if I didn't exist, enjoying their family time. Our house only has a bedroom, a storage room, and what now serves as Oliver's study, which was my former office. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long will this lifestyle continue? It seems humans can't think properly when faced with situations far beyond their usual understanding. While I was stunned, everything had already ended. The next day, no, from the moment the in-laws moved in, hell began.
"Hey, isn't the food ready yet?"
Sorry, I'm preparing it now. You're really slow.
Oliver must have a lot of patience to put up with someone like you.
The in-laws lazed around the house all day, doing nothing, and treated me like a servant. At first, I endured it, thinking it would only be for a few days. But listening to the conversations between the in-laws and Oliver, it became clear that this was going to be a permanent situation, and I awakened. Here's the summary. The in-laws had fled from their hometown because Laura had returned home after getting divorced. The reason for the divorce was Laura's infidelity. She had affairs with multiple people. All of this came to light recently, and her ex-husband demanded compensation, which they couldn't afford, so they fled here. Oliver had told me that his in-laws owned their home, but that was a lie. Originally, that house belonged to Rosalind's real family, where her parents lived. Rosalind and Harrison moved in with them because they couldn't afford to live by themselves. And after Rosalind's parents passed away, they just stayed there. The real owner was Rosalind's brother, and he asked them to leave, but they stayed, claiming residency rights. Rosalind's brother had his own home, so he couldn't force his sister's family to move out. He had requested them to leave, but couldn't do no more than that. Then, with Laura returning with a mountain of compensation to pay, Rosalind and Harrison tried to sell the house to raise money. Rosalind's brother, upon learning the situation, was furious and threatened legal action. That's why the in-laws showed up at our place with all the belongings she could carry. Those belongings, 10 boxes of them, the ones I struggled to bring into our house the day they arrived, representing their entire fortune. I don't know what's inside, and frankly, I don't want to know, but it seems there's nothing of real value that could be called a fortune. In short, the in-laws moved in with us because they were broke. And it looks like they plan to live off of us indefinitely. In such a family, Oliver was miraculously smart. He was good at his studies and managed to graduate from college on a scholarship. You wouldn't guess he's part of that family just by looking at him. He continued to play the role of a refreshing, fine young man, got a job at a well-known company, and then met and married me. I couldn't see through Oliver's true nature or the real face of the in-laws. My parents had already passed away, so I'm all alone. But I'm working and already own a house. To Oliver, I must have seemed like a perfect target. No way, I'm not going to let this happen to myself. Now that I know everything, I refuse to quietly become their slave. I won't let this no-good family take advantage of me. I started planning my retaliation and took action the very next day. For now, I had to act submissive. I couldn't let Oliver or the in-laws catch on to my plan. I had to catch them off guard. Just like how they suddenly showed up here. After pretending to listen to the in-laws for about a week, one day, Laura said to me, "Give me some money." Laura demanded, extending her open right hand. She was so blatantly freeloading. It was irritating, but I had decided not to resist for now. I handed Laura a few bills.
"Is this all? Don't you have more?"
"I don't have more on me right now since this was sudden."
"Then a credit card will do."
"Absolutely not. If I gave her a card, there's no telling what she'd do with it." "I can't lend you a card. I'll withdraw some money from the bank tomorrow. Please wait until then." I managed to quiet the complaining in-laws by making that promise. I wouldn't give them the card no matter what. That night, after Oliver came home, he complained about it.
"You could have just lent them the card."
"You're really stingy with money." I was appalled by his words, but I apologized, thinking it over. "I'm sorry. I thought there could be problems if something happened."
"Like what?"
"I was afraid of lending a card with a different name, and if Rosalind and Harrison got arrested for misuse, I couldn't do it." Oliver seemed satisfied with this reason.
Then, make a family card for my mom and dad. I'm counting on you.
Understood. I replied as such, but I had no intention of making one. About a month later, Oliver asked about the status of the family card. Maybe the in-laws, having received money several times, found it troublesome and urged Oliver to ask for the card. "I'm sorry, but it seems I can't make it," I said, feigning disappointment. I hadn't applied for a family card and wasn't disappointed at all.
Why not? Rosalind and the others are considered relatives, not family, so it doesn't work. Apparently, it's not okay just to live here temporarily.
The in-laws had just rolled in without permission, and no proper arrangements had been made for living together.
They haven't even changed the address registration, so it seems like there's no actual residence.
I see. Faced with this explanation, Oliver seemed to have no choice but to accept.
Well, then we just need to change the address registration. That's right, since we're going to live here anyway. Go ahead and take care of the procedures.
What a nerve for them to order me to do so.
About that, I think this house is a bit small for us to live in permanently. Now that you mention it, maybe
that's why you haven't been coming home much lately. When I said that, Oliver looked a bit puzzled.
I've been staying at hotels because I've been working late. Oh, that must be tough. So, I was thinking, why don't we move out of this house?
Oliver and the in-laws were surprised by my suggestion.
This house was originally bought for me to live alone, and while Oliver and I could barely make do, it's definitely too small in the current situation.
Indeed. Look at this. Wouldn't you want to live in a house like this? I showed them the brochure for a new apartment. It was a recently completed high-rise building. The brochure featured photos of a top-floor apartment. Spacious, with large windows offering a view of the city below.
How are you able to get an apartment like this?
I thought our current place was too cramped, so I decided to go for it.
I sold this place and added my parents' inheritance and savings to buy it. That's great. This place isn't bad, but that one is definitely better.
Laura and Oliver, who had been looking skeptically, relaxed when they learned the payment was already complete.
Wow, you've got some sense. I'm seeing you in a new light for the first time.
Yeah, I guess I can acknowledge you as Oliver's wife. The in-laws nodded in agreement with smiles. And just like that, the move was settled smoothly. About a month later, the day of the move arrived. It was a bit sad to say goodbye to the house we had lived in for so long, but it was for a brighter future. Once the belongings were loaded into 2 trucks, we headed to our new destination. Upon arriving at the high-rise and speaking to the concierge, we were handed the keys to our apartment. To our top-floor apartment via the high-rise exclusive elevator.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Laura was the first to dash in, exclaiming as if dancing.
Let's get unpacking.
I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, but still infuriating. The movers placed the brought items were directed, and I began unpacking alone.
I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storage.
The in-laws were assigning rooms as they pleased, but I ignored them and continued my work.
This room is truly wonderful.
A great choice for our final home.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Oliver and the in-laws were all smiles, exchanging such words.
It's like a dream to live in a house like this,
Laura said, teary-eyed. Now, it might be a good time for the reveal.
Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh?
A good moment to show the in-laws reality.
Why would you all live here?
What are you talking about? It's our new home. We're the ones who will live here.
Huh?
I feigned exaggerated surprise.
This isn't your house. I bought this place to live with my grandparents. You asked if we wanted to live in a house like this.
Laura began to make a scene, raising her voice.
Yes, I did ask if you wanted to live here, but that's all I did.
I never said you could live here. Just as I said, I never mentioned living together. Who would want to live with these people forever? So, please leave now.
I am the owner of this house. The landlord is telling you to leave.
Please comply before things get complicated.
Don't be ridiculous.
Oliver stomped his feet in anger, his face turning red.
The only thing you should be doing is listening to me. My family and I will live in this house. If you don't like it, you should leave. That's right. Get out. That's right. Leave.
Oliver and the in-laws were pressuring me to leave. I contacted the concierge directly through the intercom on the wall.
Excuse me, there are some strange people refusing to leave my house and trying to kick me out, the actual resident. Please come immediately.
As soon as I finished speaking, a siren sounded throughout the room.
What's this? So noisy. Make it stop right now.
The security staff arrived promptly after the alert. This is a high-end condominium after all.
These people are the building security. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police next.
When the security officer pressed the doorbell and asked what happened, the in-laws started panicking. They realized what I said wasn't a lie. Although the security staff arrived, the in-laws pleaded, crawling on the ground, asking to be heard. I decided to listen, curious about what Oliver had been telling them. Oliver had been telling the in-laws I was a pitiable woman with no relatives, and that I couldn't live without him. So that's why he was keeping me here. And that they could use me as they pleased, like a housekeeper. That was what he had been telling his own parents. I felt sympathy for the in-laws who provided such valuable testimony. Actually, when I gave money to the in-laws, I made them sign a paper with the amount written on it. Essentially, it was a promissory note.
I want proof that I've handed it over properly to show Oliver. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. If you sign it, I'll give you as much as you want.
Knowing they could get as much money as they wanted just by signing, the in-laws easily complied. Thanks to that, I had proof of how much I had lent them. I had been thinking of collecting from the in-laws, but it seemed impossible for them to pay back. So I decided to take it from Oliver instead and thought it best to evict them from the apartment. Thanks to this, you've helped me a lot. If you leave now, I'll consider this never happened, but if you come back, you'll have to pay everything all at once. As I showed them the promissory note and said this, the in-laws finally gave up and left.
I'm Katrina's husband. I have the right to live here. I won't leave.
Oliver refused to move. If that's how you feel, let's settle this here and now.
All right, let's have a little talk then. But if you try anything funny, I'll call them right back.
I thanked the security guards and sent them back home.
Why are you doing this? Did you dislike my family that much?
Of course I do. They suddenly show up, treating me like slaves in a sneak attack. I made it clear to Oliver. Fine. If you dislike them that much, I'll tell my mom and dad to leave. But I can stay, right? I was astounded. He was planning to abandon his in-laws just so he could stay. What a despicable man. No, you need to leave too.
Why? We're married, aren't we?
I presented Oliver with a folder.
What is this?
Oliver turned pale as he looked inside the folder. A pretty woman, isn't she? I heard you've been living together for half the week lately. It was evidence of Oliver's affair. There were tons of photos of the two looking cozy, arm in arm, walking together, entering a hotel. Oliver had started dating her right after marrying me.
I heard you had plans to live with her in that apartment once we were separated. Lies! Who would say such a thing?
I turned on the voice recorder I was holding. The voice of the other woman played, and Oliver froze. The evidence was obtained by a detective agency. They approached the woman, kindly informed her that Oliver was married, and recorded what she had to say. The woman proudly claimed that Oliver was in the midst of divorce proceedings, and once he kicked out his wife, they would live together in Oliver's apartment. Oliver told his affair partner he wanted to divorce, but I wouldn't agree, and after being worn out by the in-laws, I would quietly leave. The affair partner believed she was the only one Oliver loved, thinking the marriage had already cooled off. True love will prevail, she laughed. But when she realized she was talking to someone from a detective agency, she panicked and started to cover for herself. She claimed she was also deceived by Oliver, truly believing the marriage was over. She begged for forgiveness, promising to tell everything. The detective asked me what to do, and upon saying it depended on what she said, she spilled everything not even asked for. All of that was recorded. I guess true love seems quite fragile.
Yes, I got the evidence. Looks like this is going to cost a pretty penny in damages.
Oliver collapsed weakly onto the floor.
Your stuff is already sent to that woman's condo, so you can start living there from today. Now, leave.
I called the concierge again and had Oliver, who was still drained, thrown out. As promised, I decided not to delve further into the affair partner. Her testimony was enough to prove Oliver's maliciousness. Thanks to that, I was able to get a substantial amount in damages from Oliver. It was enough to forgive him. However, I made sure to inform the woman's parents and her company. I hadn't promised not to tell anyone, so it should be fine to talk. The woman was Oliver's junior at work. They got close as they worked together. It would have been a nice story if they weren't married. I complained to the company about what kind of employee training they were providing, which led to our divorce. The company apologized for the lack of supervision. Concerned about their social reputation, the company made the woman resign under the guise of voluntary resignation. Oliver was demoted and transferred from the head office to a subsidiary as a punishment. During work hours, the two of them would concoct lies about sales meetings and sneak off to hotels, or take trips together and claim them as business expenses. Given the harm they caused the company, such actions seemed justified to them. I heard through the grapevine that the in-laws are now living together in her apartment for real. It's your fault things have ended up like this, take responsibility. That's what they say, squatting in the condominium where Oliver and the woman live. Oliver and the woman had to take out loans to pay me compensation. Now they live a difficult life, struggling every day to repay their debt. It might be about time to finally kick the in-laws out, I suppose. Oliver thought I was just some pitiful woman, burdened with grandparents who were in a care facility, but the reality was a bit different. My grandparents were indeed in a facility, but it was a luxurious place where wealthy people live gracefully. They used to run a company and had planned to pass it on to my parents, but they died young. So they retired after handing it over to someone they could trust. That was the year I graduated from college. I've loved drawing since I was a child and have won numerous awards for it. I told my grandparents I wanted to work in art, so they never forced me to take over the company. They decided to move into that facility so I could live freely as I wished. I followed my dreams into a career related to art, and now I'm becoming known as a children's book author. My illustrated books have become a big hit, and I'm now somewhat of a celebrity. I feel like my luck has turned around dramatically since splitting up with Oliver. He must be regretting it by now. I bought that high-rise apartment with the money from selling that condo, my parents' inheritance, and my book royalties. I wanted to live with my grandparents again while they were still healthy. Of course, I'm keeping the facility as an option. It's necessary for when either of my grandparents becomes physically incapacitated and needs extensive care. But for now, they're both still healthy. Thanks to my book sales, I can finally give back to my grandparents. We can live happily together for a while longer. Though I went through some hardships because of that man, my future is looking bright. My name is Luna. I was a 28-year-old who worked in a flower shop located in an office building, creating flower arrangements. My husband, Oliver, was 30, 2 years older than me, and worked as a hairstylist in the same building on the second floor. He was not exactly a celebrity stylist, but he was quite popular. We were celebrating our 3rd year of marriage that year. Apart from the fact that we had been unable to have children, I thought we were doing well as a happy couple. But it seemed I was the only one who thought that way. How did we first meet? Oliver used to frequently buy flowers for his salon from the flower shop on the 1st floor. Initially wary of Oliver, who was skilled in conversation due to his job, I gradually found it natural to have him by my side. How long was it after we started dating? Oliver invited me to dinner at his parents' house, saying he wanted to introduce me to his family. There, Oliver's brother and his fiancée were also present. I had heard about Oliver's struggles being compared to his excellent younger brother, but his brother was unpretentious and amiable, easy to talk to. Handsome, good-natured, and dependable, his brother had it all. Can't blame the parents for comparing, really. His fiancée, too, was beautiful and seemed quite talented. A stunningly attractive couple. Sitting opposite them, I couldn't help but wonder if I would be compared to his brother's bride-to-be if I married Oliver. During the lively conversation over dinner,
Have you guys decided on a date for the wedding ceremony?
Oliver asked his brother. Then, we're about to decide. We'd love some suggestions for good venues. The brother and his fiancée replied. Oliver's brother, a promising banker, and his fiancée, working at a securities firm, were both solid professionals. Thinking they would prefer something luxurious, considering they'd invite bosses and work colleagues, I suggested some famous venues where my corporate friends had their weddings. The fiancée searched the venues on her mobile phone, happily engrossed in a page showing a venue with a garden chapel. Then Oliver chimed in.
Hey, why don't we do the wedding ceremony together? How about a restaurant wedding?
And so he had proposed with a casual tone. It was something I had hoped would happen eventually, but I was shocked by his sudden suggestion, especially since he hadn't yet formally met my parents. Then, from somewhere, I heard a distinct sking noise. I couldn't believe it, but it seemed like the sound came from my BIL's fiancée. She was making an incredibly dissatisfied face and muttering under her breath.
BIL's girlfriend might be okay with such a ceremony, but I.
Then Lucas, Oliver's brother, exclaimed.
Bro, that's a great idea. These kinds of stylish ceremonies are becoming more popular.
He seemed genuinely excited about Oliver's suggestion. Being more displeased, the fiancée glared at me more, as if to stop Oliver from saying whatever he wanted. But she was glaring at the wrong person. If she had a problem, I wished she would speak up to the enthusiastic brothers instead. Subsequently, driven by the brothers' excitement, we ended up planning a restaurant wedding, and everything progressed quickly. In a flurry, we managed to greet my parents, and the 4 of us dined out to choose a venue. As days passed, the once disgruntled fiancé warmed up to Oliver, who was now BIL, and they got along so well that one would think they were the couple getting married. However, her attitude towards me remained unchanged. And so, 6 months later, the 2 couples held their restaurant weddings. After the marriage, I switched from full-time to part-time at work, focusing more on household chores. I left for work after sending Oliver off, returned home earlier to prepare dinner, and waited for Oliver's return. This became my routine. Sometimes, my BIL and his wife, both working full-time, relied on our dinner unexpectedly. It seemed cooking was too much of a hassle for them. Camila, my CL, came with just a token gift, evidently expecting me to cook, sparing herself the effort. At the dinner table, Camila oddly sat next to Oliver instead of her husband, treating me more like a convenient housekeeper. Honestly, their visits were far from welcome. Moreover, she indirectly criticized me, saying I looked plain or that my only talent was messing with flowers. I couldn't stand being demeaned in front of Oliver, but I hated confrontations, so I pretended not to mind Camila's words. Instead, after they left,
Why does she look down on people so much? It's terrible to imply someone's worthless if they don't work at an office.
I vented to Oliver.
She's a competent and successful woman. Maybe you're just hearing it that way, Luna. It sounds like you're envious. You shouldn't say things like that.
But his response was always defensive of Camila. Oliver, proud of his brother's achievements, seemed unwilling to hear anything negative about his brother's wife. It felt like he was implying I was the problem, listing all of Camila's virtues instead. Recently, my daily life had changed a bit due to Lucas's sudden solo assignment. Camila, too, seemed somewhat reluctant to come uninvited to our dinners alone. With fewer visits from her, I was free from her snide comments and had been able to spend my days more peacefully. But now, a different worry had surfaced. For some reason, Oliver had been coming home late at night, day after day, leaving me to have dinner and go to bed alone. It was really worrying that he had been returning home after midnight so frequently. I hoped he didn't fall ill. One morning, as Oliver hurriedly got ready for work.
You've been coming home late recently. Are you okay? I'm worried you might wear yourself out.
I asked him. Oliver didn't even look at me.
No need to worry. It's just a contest. I'm busy preparing for a hair contest.
He stammered.
I haven't heard anything about a hair contest.
Usually, he'd make a big deal about entering a hair contest weeks in advance, but this time, nothing. Isn't that strange? Sensing his haste, I asked.
When is this contest? You didn't mention it before. Did you decide to enter suddenly?
Without turning face to me, he replied.
Yeah, that's right. I overlooked the invitation. I've been busy arranging for a cut model and stuff.
He didn't even look at me. Come to think of it, when a contest was near, a really cute cut model used to come to the salon after hours. Is she coming this time too?
Is it the same cut model you usually have?
I asked nonchalantly. Oliver exaggeratedly replied.
Yeah, that's right. I've been keeping her late. Really, I feel so bad about it.
His manner of speaking seemed exaggerated.
What is this? This feels so forced. Doesn't his speech sound unnatural?
Despite my feelings.
Is that really okay? It's dangerous to keep a girl late every day, even if you're short on time.
When I looked at Oliver, he seemed determined to avoid eye contact. Glancing at his watch, he said.
Look at the time. I'm going to be late.
Ignoring my words, he hurried out the door.
Did he just run away?
That reaction was so unnatural. Am I overthinking this? Could it be something with the cut model, an affair? No, that can't be it. The more I thought about it, the worse my thoughts got. After all, such things are unthinkable, aren't they? It's just my bad habit of overthinking. I need to stop that. It's just the late nights because of the hair contest preparations, that's all. Carrying these troubled thoughts, I got ready and headed to work. When I arrived at the shop, Mason, the manager of the salon where Oliver worked, was there picking out flowers for the salon. It was usually Oliver who picked the flowers, so it was unusual to see Mason here. Mason said he leaves the flower selection to Oliver because he doesn't know much about them. Could it be that Oliver asked Mason to pick the flowers to avoid further questions about this morning's conversation? I decided to probe a little.
Oliver is participating in a hair contest with you, right? Good luck with that,
I said to Mason. But Mason looked confused.
Which hair contest? We don't have any such plans,
he asked. I also asked about the cut model, but he said they hadn't requested any recently. Apparently, the model was Mason's cousin, who was currently studying abroad. As for the late nights, Mason said that Oliver had been leaving the salon at the regular closing time, so there was no way he had to come home after midnight. It seemed like everything Oliver told me was a lie. So, what had Oliver been doing every night, and with whom? While my suspicion about the cut model was cleared, I still felt uneasy. Stunned and trying to grasp the situation.
Should I subtly ask him about it?
Mason offered. I thought about accepting Mason's offer, but would Oliver give him a straight answer? I felt like Oliver, being so good at talking, would give vague responses. It seemed more likely that something was going on. I didn't want to give Oliver any chance to concoct an excuse. I had to keep it a secret that I was aware of his lies and probing into the matter. I told Mason that I would handle it myself for now, and asked him to keep our conversation secret, saying I would seek his advice if needed. That night, I decided to wait for Oliver and ask him as if I was oblivious to everything. I doubted he would tell me the truth anyway. Around midnight, Oliver finally came home. While claiming to have been working late, he looked slightly startled when he saw me waiting up.
I'm home. I'm exhausted. Finally got the new haircut done,
he said, unaware that I knew everything. I wondered what kind of amazing haircut he completed. I asked Oliver, who was trying to mask his nervousness. You must be worn out. Hey, do you mind if I ask something? As I spoke quietly. What's up? What do you want to know? His voice trembled. Are you really working? Are you really preparing for a hair contest? Oliver replied. Well, of course I am. What else would it be? His unease was apparent. He seemed intent on sticking to his lies. In that case. Oh? What about cheating? Yes or no? I asked directly, and his face changed completely.
What? Of course, I'm not.
Oliver began to get defensive. Even the usually eloquent Oliver had no room for jokes. Despite his panic, he tried to weave an escape with desperate excuses. You know, Mason told me. The hair contest is a lie, right? Wouldn't it be better to just come clean? What are you really doing? I cornered him with no escape. Apparently, he had no excuses left and, trembling with clenched fists.
Fine. I'll say it. It's an affair. I've fallen in love with someone else,
he blurted out. His confession came off as resigned and frustrated. He even started to get angry, as if it was some sort of injustice. I tried to get him to confess who the other person was, but he refused to say, probably because it was someone he shouldn't be involved with. No matter how much I pressed, my anger only grew.
Then, I'll hire a detective or whatever it takes to find out. Just be ready.
It's Camila. Hearing my words, he went pale and confessed in a defeated tone. Camila? Isn't she Lucas's wife? I was shocked, and he retorted.
Yes, Camila. She's pregnant with my child.
You haven't had a child with me, but you did with someone else, and that someone is your brother's wife? That's despicable. As I hurled accusations at Oliver, he retorted with unreasonable words.
It's your fault for being infertile. Anyway, I'm going to take responsibility and divorce you.
His words were infuriatingly unfair. That explained why he always sided with his Sael over me.
Are you kidding? Do you even realize what you're saying? Does Lucas know?
To have been treated this way by him, I couldn't help but be angry.
It doesn't matter. Camila and I won't be separated. She's going to divorce Lucas and be with me. No one can stop us,
Oliver declared defiantly.
If you don't like it, then let's get a divorce right now.
Disgusted by his words, I retorted.
Don't like it? That's an understatement. I'll gladly divorce you.
I decided then and there to cut ties with this hopeless man. The next day, I told everything to my parents, my in-laws, and Lucas, who was at his assignment location. Shocked and furious, they couldn't believe Oliver and Camila had an affair and were expecting a child. Despite their family's reactions, both were unapologetic and brazen.
All this is Asael's fault, right? If she's upset about the affair or didn't notice it, it's her own fault. If Lucas wants to blame someone, he should blame Asael.
Camila even had the audacity to put the blame on me. Their lack of remorse disgusted everyone. Lucas decided to divorce Camila, and both Oliver and Camila were disowned by our parents and Lucas. Later, when I reported the situation to Mason, the concerned salon manager,
he was one of our recommended hairstylists. This could affect our salon's reputation. I need to think about what to do with Oliver,
he said while crossing his arms. 3 months later, after Camila's remarriage prohibition period ended, she and Oliver got married. Yet, for some reason, I was getting calls from Oliver on my mobile phone. I was at work, and as far as I was concerned, he was a person from my past. I had nothing to say to him, yet he kept calling persistently if I ignored him. Oliver, still somehow keeping his job under Mason's management and working in the beauty salon on the second floor, was someone I don't want showing up at the flower shop. Reluctantly, I answered the call. "Hey, can you help me out here?" His voice was weak and pitiful, a far cry from his earlier bravado.
"Why should I? I have no obligation to help you. Can you stop bothering me during work?"
As I was about to hang up. "Don't be so cold. Can I come over to talk?" Oliver appeared to really want to talk. Not wanting him to actually come, I decided to listen. It turned out he was in quite a laughable predicament. According to Oliver, on the day they registered their marriage, Camila received a demand for alimony in a divorce lawsuit via a formal notice.
"What's this about?"
he questioned, and it turned out Camila had been having an affair with her boss, and his wife found out, demanding $50,000 in alimony. Moreover, she was pregnant, and it was unclear whether the child was Oliver's or her boss's. He might end up raising a child that isn't his.
"I have no confidence in raising a child that might not be mine. Tell me how to get a divorce."
His SOS to me was the last thing I needed.
"Just say what you told me,"
was all the advice I gave.
That's it.
That was the last call I ever received from Oliver. Nevertheless, both my former sister-in-law and ex-husband were such despicable people. They were both broke after paying us alimony in the divorce suits. Oliver was likely to be fired by Mason now, and with Camila's affair scandal at work, she would probably be fired too, burdened with a hefty debt of $50,000 for alimony. What would they do now? Face bankruptcy? It seemed like a miserable life awaits them, socially and personally obliterated. As for me, I remarried a man who supplies flowers to my shop and am expecting a long-awaited child. I live happily, surrounded by beautiful flowers, a kind and honest husband, and looking forward to holding my lovely child. Despite being called plain, living true to myself is best. I've learned my lesson to stay away from smooth talkers and those who look down on others. My name is Alice. I've been married for 8 years and have a 6-year-old daughter, Laura, and a 4-year-old son, Eddie. My husband Sam was a colleague at the same company. When I was assigned to the same team, I was supposed to support him, but being new to the job, I often ended up receiving his support instead. I was drawn to his work ethic and kindness. We had a successful project, and a party was thrown to celebrate. He was the main contributor to the success, and naturally, the star of the party. Amidst everyone's praises, he took my hand and said,
"I really appreciate Alice's support. This success is partly thanks to her."
I responded, "I haven't done anything significant. Thank you though." But I was thrilled that he recognized my efforts. As the party ended and everyone was leaving, he and I ended up being alone together because we were heading in the same direction. It's odd to say this here, but I'd like to date you. I have feelings for you. Surprised and overjoyed by his sudden confession, I was filled with happiness. It was because I had also fallen for him. 6 months into our relationship, he proposed to me. The proposal came unexpectedly on our way back from watching a movie and having dinner together. I was so overwhelmed with happiness that tears came to my eyes.
Why not in the restaurant we just left, but on this street?
But then I remembered that he asked me out on the street too, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. He was a bit surprised by my reaction, but after hearing my explanation, he apologized saying, "Sorry for the lack of delicacy." We decided to get married and started making various preparations. Among them, greeting his parents was important. Actually, both of my parents had already passed away. My mother died of an illness when I was in junior high, and my father died in a sudden traffic accident the month I started working. Being an only child, I suddenly found myself alone. So, I felt both joy at the prospect of gaining new parents and anxiety about what these two people I had yet to meet would be like. According to him, his father Jack is strict but kind and is someone he respects greatly. Jack's also still working energetically as a director of a trading company. As for his mother Emily, a housewife who always supported Dad and who loved and raised me with care. Sam shared that with a bit of shyness. I was nervous when I greeted them. Jack said smiling, "I'm happy to have you in our family. If my son has chosen you, then I'm relieved." Emily also smiled saying so. We continued to discuss various things about the wedding and our future home as a group of 4. After the meal, while helping Emily with the dishes in the kitchen, just the two of us, she suddenly said,
"I feel sorry that you have no parents, but I wonder if such a girl is really suitable to be Sam's wife."
It came out of nowhere. She lost the friendliness I had felt until then and feeling belittled. I was stunned and didn't know how to respond. While washing the dishes, she continued to express her dissatisfaction towards me. Her calm tone seemed to reveal her true feelings, and I couldn't bear it anymore. She never showed any sign of belittling me or speaking ill of me in front of others. The huge gap in her attitude was terrifying to me. Nevertheless, the wedding was a grand affair. Sam said,
"It's a once-in-a-lifetime event for a woman."
And planned it for me. Jack agreed with his idea and helped make it happen. Many people attended, including our company colleagues and Jack's business associates. That made it a lively ceremony. Sam and I had agreed to continue working until we had children. However, it seemed that Emily disapproved of it. When I was alone with her in the dressing room before the wedding, she whispered in my ear, "So, you're continuing your job. A wife should support her husband." Poor Sam.
"I quit my job right away to support my husband."
She said that with a tone of sarcasm. There was a staff member from the venue in the dressing room to help us prepare, so I think Emily was discreet for their sake. I felt a strong will in her to never reveal her true nature or true feelings to anyone. After the wedding, we rented a roomy house close to my in-laws' house. It was a large property for just the two of us. "Let's choose a house with enough room for our future children." It was the room that Sam had decided on. After a delightful honeymoon, we began our life in our new home and decided to invite my in-laws over for dinner. Upon seeing the new home, Jack said, "It's a splendid house." He highly praised it. Emily just smiled and agreed with him. Based on past experiences, I could imagine what Emily was thinking and felt creeped out. After dinner, they left thoroughly pleased. I felt somewhat exhausted and just sat in a chair, zoning out. Sam noticed and asked what was wrong, but it was difficult to explain, so I responded, "I'm just a little tired." Late that night, there was a call on my cell phone. When I looked at the screen, it was from Emily. I hesitated for a moment, and it took me a little longer to answer the phone.
"You took a while to answer.
Were you planning not to pick up?" "No, that's not it," I said. "However, I wonder." She coldly responded,
"Most of the dishes today were delivered. It's clear you're taking the easy way out. The dishes you made weren't impressive and they were bland. I'm worried about Sam's diet."
She started by criticizing my cooking and then complained about everything from how the room was organized to the interior design. Just listening to her was tiring. Since there had been no chance for us to be alone today, she used the phone to express her feelings. That night, due to the exhaustion, I couldn't fall asleep and it affected my return to work the next day. Since our new home was close to my in-laws, Emily frequently visited. Sam was simply happy that his mother was coming over, but for me, even our precious days off weren't restful. I knew Emily's ways all too well, so I made sure to act smartly to avoid being alone with her as much as possible. When Sam was with us, she was a pleasant mother-in-law. But knowing her drastic changes, even that felt eerie and frightening to me. Whenever I acted to avoid being alone with her, there would inevitably follow a barrage of phone calls. Each call would last over 30 minutes, filled with complaints and snide remarks that left me exhausted. If I tried to ignore them, she'd sense it and become even angrier. I was at a loss about what to do. 2 years into our marriage, we were blessed with a child. Sam was overjoyed. When we went to inform my in-laws, Jack's happiness rivaled Sam's. Even Emily seemed genuinely happy at the prospect of holding a grandchild, but her true feelings became clear later. I always made sure not to be alone with Emily, but this time Jack and Sam were pulled away for work-related calls, leaving us alone. As expected, she said. Really, it took you 2 years because you kept working after marriage. I always thought you were a useless wife, but you just barely made it this time. It seemed she was always displeased with me continuing my job. Emily, now that we've been blessed with a child, and as I've discussed with Sam, I'll be quitting my job soon to focus on parenting and the household. I explained her, but her complaints continued. The return of Jack and Sam from their calls thankfully ended the conversation. About 5 months later, I resigned from my job. On my last day, the bouquet I received from my colleagues was the most delightful thing. 3 months after that, I safely gave birth to a baby girl. It was an easy birth for my first child, and I was able to leave the hospital early to start our new life as a family of 3. We soon invited my in-laws over to introduce them to our daughter, Laura. Jack looked at his granddaughter with joy. When he offered his little finger, Laura gripped it tightly, a natural reflex for babies, but he was delighted. I remembered Sam doing the same thing a couple of days ago, skipping around happily. I thought Emily would surely be satisfied holding her adorable grandchild, but I was naive. That night, I received another call from her. It's fine that you have a grandchild, but why a girl? The first one should have been a boy. She blamed me for not giving birth to a male heir, despite Sam being happy with our child regardless of gender. I don't want to be criticized for something like that. Feeling like our child's worth was being denied, I finally stood up to her. She was angry at my rare resistance and became even more sarcastic. It felt like my child was being ridiculed, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I finally told Sam about it. I had never really spoken to him about Emily before, and he seemed quite surprised. He also said, "I can't stand the way Mom talks down to Laura." And he apologized to me. "I'm sorry for all the trouble you've been through." He promised that from now on, we would keep some distance from Emily. After that, our interactions with her decreased, and so did the harassment from her. Perhaps because I felt more secure in parenting and my life with Sam, we were blessed with another child when Laura turned 2. Then, our son was born. Sam's joy at that time was even greater than before. "Did you prefer having a boy?" I asked. "That doesn't matter. I'm just so happy that Laura has a little brother." He smiled. We reported the birth of our son Eddie to my in-laws and showed them his face. Jack was overjoyed just like Sam and congratulated us on having 2 children. As for Emily, it was the same as when Laura was born. On the phone, she said, "You finally gave birth to a boy. At least you've been somewhat useful now. But I wonder if someone like you can properly raise an important heir." The daughter doesn't seem to be raised well either. Even at a young age, Laura seemed to sense the negative aura emanating from Emily. She was very fond of Jack, but she didn't get close to her much. That seemed to be a source of dissatisfaction for Emily. Ironically, the root cause was her own behavior, yet she seemed oblivious to this fact. Unable to bear her criticizing my children, I told Sam about it. When I played a recording of my conversation with Emily as evidence, he sighed and shook his head. We decided once again to keep our distance from her. Peaceful days returned to me. Time passed, and Laura turned 6, while Eddie became 4 years old. One time, Jack had to go on a long business trip overseas. The company was focusing on expanding its business and increasing dealings with foreign partners, and he was going as the person in charge of the initiative. A week after Jack left, Emily suddenly visited our house. Moreover, she brought a lot of baggage with her. When I asked what was going on, she said, "Jack is away now and I was bored, so I decided to come and stay. I'll be in your care. Besides, it looks like you might be getting busier, right?
I'll help out around the house for a bit.
Actually, just the other day, can you help me with my work? A friend had asked me. The friend owns an interior shop and suddenly one of her employees had quit, leaving her short-staffed. Just until I can find a replacement. She said. I was considering the offer since my children were still young. I was puzzled about how Emily knew about it, but I was more shocked by her sudden decision to move in. Unable to send her away, I let Emily into the house, and she quickly started organizing her belongings. That evening, when Sam came home, I told him about it. He was also surprised by Emily's sudden arrival. She knew about the work request because Sam had told her. He had accidentally mentioned it while contacting her for a different matter. The thought of living with her was dizzying to me. I asked Sam, "Can you talk to Emily and get her to go home?" But he said, "It's only for a short while, and it'll make it easier for you to take up your friend's request." So, Emily's stay was decided. I was relieved that I could go to work and be away from her, but I was terribly worried about leaving the children in her care. I felt like the children were being held hostage by her, leaving me restless. The kids talked to me about their interactions with Emily. It seemed that she was only paying attention to Eddie. "Perhaps because he's the heir," Laura said. "It's sad." And shed tears. Her sarcasm continued, pushing me to the edge. Combined with the fatigue from the unfamiliar job, I was nearing my limit. Seeing my distress, Sam listened to me. He said, "I can't overlook this anymore," and gave me some advice. Just like before, when I recorded my call with Emily, start collecting evidence. He had instructed. He handed me a voice recorder and a video camera. The next day, I began recording all of Emily's sarcasms. I set up the video in the living room and carried the voice recorder during conversations with her. Although her attacks continued, the thought of standing up to her gave me mental strength. As the evidence accumulated, I was strangely surprised by how much could be gathered in such a short period. Finally, she demanded that I divorce Sam and leave the house. The nerve of a parasite dictating terms in my family's home brought me to my breaking point. I discussed with Sam and decided to take action. "Get out!" When Emily said, "Understood, then it's goodbye." Hearing that, thinking she had one. Finally, even someone as stupid as you understands. "But what a terrible wife, leaving your children behind." She laughed and said, "No, it's you who will be leaving. That's why I said goodbye." Hearing it, "What are you talking about?" Ignoring her anger, I pulled out my cell phone and made a call. Once the person on the other end answered, I handed the phone to her. Her face visibly paled as she took the call. The person on the line was Jack, who was overseas. "What are you doing, leaving our home unattended like this? Isn't it a wife's duty to protect her home? You've been harassing Alice? What is the meaning of this?" Unable to respond to his words, Emily filled with anger. She began to sweat profusely, and her eyes turned vacant. I had asked Sam to gather substantial evidence, which we then sent to Jack overseas. In today's age, whether someone is overseas or anywhere else, data can be sent with just a click. "I've seen the terrible things you've done. I won't hear any excuses." Among the evidence was a video of Emily taking money from my wallet. I had been worried about my money disappearing mysteriously, but I never thought it was her. Jack told her, "Go back home immediately and reflect on your actions. Moreover, I'll be returning home temporarily and we'll have a talk then." Saying so, he ended the call. After hanging up, Emily quickly packed her things in a daze and fled back to her own home. Later, when Jack returned temporarily, he lectured her and even considered divorce, completely breaking her down. After the incident, she never interfered with me again. Laura and Eddie said, "Mommy would never leave us. Grandma doesn't understand anything." That's right. I would never abandon my precious family. Sam stood by me. I am resolved to cherish this family always. Thus, a peaceful life came to our family of 4. Didn't you hear me? So, a high school graduate is even poor in hearing. I'm saying I want my child to be born to a more accomplished woman. My genes are too good to be wasted on a mere high school grad. Before we got married, my husband used to say that educational background didn't matter in love. Now, he berates me, a high school graduate, as trash and says he's leaving to remarry a woman with an elite college degree.
Oh man, what a misfortune to have a wife with such low education.
I'm truly unlucky. With those parting words, he left to elope with the elite college graduate woman. My name is Megan and I turned 27 this year. I married Leo, 3 years my senior. I'm a high school graduate working as an office worker in a trading company, and I met him through a friend from high school. Unlike me, he graduated from a prestigious university and works in sales at a major corporation, a true elite. Initially, I felt unworthy of such an amazing person, but every time we met, educational background doesn't matter. I like you for who you are, he would say. I believed his words and married him. But now, I regret that decision. As soon as we got married, he started looking down on me for my education and income. To him, a high school grad working at a small trading company, I might seem like an underachiever. But it was he who wanted to marry me. During our relationship, sensing my inferiority complex, he comforted me with kind words, now a shadow of his former self.
Megan, you should find a new job. It's embarrassing to have a wife working for such a low-income company.
He says this without any remorse.
But I don't want to go to a busier company right now, especially since we're trying to conceive. Besides, I like my current job and the company.
My voice fades under his cold gaze. He sighs in annoyance and retreats to the bedroom before I can say anything else. He probably thought I was going to talk about trying to conceive again. He is right. I wanted to have some time to talk with him about trying to conceive and not making any progress. I've been wanting to have a child since we got married, and he used to be enthusiastic about having 3 siblings. But now, there's no hope of having a child. Whenever I gently ask for his cooperation in trying to conceive,
I don't want to raise a child born to a high school grad.
He avoids me, saying. Shocked by his words, I've been unable to have a proper conversation with him. Our marriage feels empty. He constantly belittles me, demanding gratitude for picking up an elite like himself, and pushes all household chores onto me. Lately, he's even started skimping on living expenses. Apparently, he thinks I spend too much and should save more. I've been cutting back as much as possible, but sometimes I have to dip into my savings from before we were married. I should naturally want a divorce by now, but I can't bring myself to say it to him. I'm afraid of how he might react. Plus, I don't want to betray my parents, who were so happy about our marriage and looking forward to their first grandchild. As our marriage grew colder, he spent less and less time at home. Coming home in the morning became the norm. When he did come home late at night, he'd wake me up to make him snacks, among other outrageous behaviors. And every time he returned late at night, I could smell women's perfume on him. Even without a woman's intuition, it was clear he was cheating. But I was too scared to confront the truth. Then, one day, he said he was leaving.
My real girlfriend is finally pregnant.
I'm moving in with her tomorrow. I was stunned. Didn't you hear me?
A high school grad is even bad at listening. My superior genes are too good for someone like you.
He ranted without being asked. He had been cheating, and the woman was a younger graduate from the same prestigious university as him. She got pregnant, so he decided to cut ties with me and remarry her. She was a new employee, you see.
Getting married and taking maternity leave right after joining would affect her career. And since I'm such a great catch, I get a lot of introductions to women from my boss. So I thought I'd marry some convenient woman until she finished her rookie year.
That convenient woman turned out to be me. With no need to hide anything anymore, his face was more hideous than I'd ever seen.
You work for a trading company, right? Even if it's small, I thought you might have some useful connections or manufacturers. But what a mistake! You have no decent contacts, and all you do is nag about kids, being just a high school grad.
He said that, looking at me. As I stood there speechless, he laughed mockingly and stood up from the sofa.
Oh man! To be married to such a low-educated woman. I am truly unfortunate. A worthless woman like you wasting my precious time.
Without even a glance at me, he walked out the front door. I listened to the sound of the door locking and took deep breaths. My tense body slowly relaxed, and cold sweat broke out all over me. Now that I understood Leo's scheme, I had no hesitation. I quickly had my dinner and secluded myself in my room before he returned. The next day, I left home early for work and picked up divorce papers. My hands trembling with nerves, I managed to open the door to find no sign of Leo. His favorite sofa in the living room was also gone. Searching the house, I found all of his belongings missing. I hadn't seen him since he left yesterday. On the table, I saw a stack of papers and a thin envelope. Turning over his neatly written note, I found completed divorce papers. The note said, "I've told the in-laws, so don't contact me again." I emotionlessly filled in the blanks on the divorce papers. Not a tear was shed. After finishing, I picked up the envelope marked settlement money. Inside, there were only $2,000. Perhaps he intended it as compensation for the divorce. Though far too little, I could use it to hire a lawyer for a proper settlement claim. I was planning to visit a law firm on the weekend when I received a call. It was from the house management company, saying the rent for the last and current month was overdue. Unable to reach Leo, they called my mobile. My savings, already depleted from covering living expenses, were insufficient. I had no choice but to use the $2,000 from the envelope. At the law firm, they told me it would be difficult to claim more. Most of the money left by him had already been spent on rent. It seemed that by using the rent money, I had accepted the settlement from Leo. Since we lived together, I had an obligation to pay rent. Knowing I had no savings, he must have deliberately left the $2,000 to prevent me from taking further action. I had unwittingly used the money he left. With no savings and most of my income going to rent, I couldn't afford to live there. I began searching for cheaper accommodation and soon moved back to my parents' house after informing them of the divorce. The shock made me never want to marry again, but my parents thought differently. Back home, they encouraged me daily, saying I was still young enough for marriage and children. Feeling guilty about disappointing them, I started looking for a new partner while commuting to my now distant job. I filled my schedule quickly, perhaps to distract myself. Maybe I wanted to overwrite that nightmarish marriage with a fulfilling life. My efforts bore fruit sooner than expected. During my search for a partner, I clicked with a man, and 2 years after my divorce, I was remarried and had a daughter. My new husband, Anthony, was the same age as me and also a high school graduate. He worked at a car repair shop near my parents' house and we met at a local marriage party. Anthony was self-conscious about being a high school graduate, but I never chose people based on their education, unlike my ex-husband. Anthony never cared about my education either and was always generous and never looked down on people. We set up our new home near my parents' house, and I was busy yet happy with work and raising our child. In the whirlwind of days, I had long forgotten Leo, my ex-husband. It was about 10 years after the divorce when I unexpectedly ran into him. I was at a German language speech competition with my daughter. "Is that Megan?" I turned around when a man called out from behind. Though he had aged in the last decade, I recognized that face I wished I could forget. Next to Leo stood a boy about the same age as my daughter. Noticing my gaze, he said with an untroubled smile, "He's my son with Olivia. She's an elite, a state university graduate. We're paying a lot for his gifted education." Olivia must be the college graduate he eloped with. He bragged about his child's intelligence, ignoring me. As I remained silent, he glanced at my daughter. "Where's your husband?" "Let me guess, he's a high school grad too, right?" It was true, but admitting that my husband was also a high school graduate would only invite more insults. Wanting to avoid trouble, I didn't confirm or deny, but quickly left with my daughter. I knew it, children of high school grads have a different look. Just like those foolish faces around here. No way such a child can speak decent German. He said mockingly, stepping in front of us. I was stunned by his audacity to look down on others, even children, in front of his own child. Though my daughter didn't understand the meaning of high school grad, she sensed she was being insulted and her face twisted as if she was about to cry. Seeing this, I glared at him.
Can't you stop insulting even children? Aren't you ashamed as a dad?
My anger didn't faze him. It's the truth.
A high school grad's child participating in a German contest is absurd. Such children should just play in the park.
He said his piece and disappeared into the crowd with his child. Anger boiled within me, but seeing my daughter's anxious face, I composed myself. It's okay, you've practiced a lot. Just do like we did at home, and you'll win. Mom guarantees it. I spoke to her quietly, meeting her eyes. As her mother, I had to be strong. She nodded slowly, digesting my words. After registering, I took my seat in the audience. Now, it was just a matter of trusting my child's abilities. I took a deep breath, waiting for the competition to start. Most children, including Leo, were overwhelmed by nerves and the atmosphere, giving poor speeches. My daughter, however, spoke fluently and clearly, the best of all the participants. My prediction was right. She won the German speech competition. Leaving the venue with her, holding a large bouquet and wearing a medal around her neck. We planned to celebrate at a fancy restaurant.
Megan! Wait!
A loud voice called from behind. I quickly shielded my daughter and turned to face Leo. His child's eyes were red from crying. Enviously looking at my daughter's medal.
It's ridiculous that your child won. A child raised by a high school grad speaking so well.
He was upset that his child hadn't won, and my daughter had. Assuming we couldn't possibly speak German, he ranted. People exiting the venue watched him curiously, but he seemed oblivious.
Which school did you send her to? Or did you hire a tutor from your meager earnings? I haven't enrolled her in any classes, nor have I hired a tutor.
When I stated this simply, he looked at me incredulously.
There's no way. You can't even speak German properly. Have you forgotten what I do?
He looked puzzled.
Working in a trading company's office, you need a decent command of German. Plus, Grandpa lives in Germany, so I grew up hearing German. My daughter learned it naturally through conversations with him.
I patted my daughter's head, who was peeking from behind me. I've been speaking German with my grandfather since I was a child. I chose to work in the trading company to utilize my German skills. When my daughter was born, we often video called him to show him her growth, and she naturally started speaking German. I never forced German education on her. But gradually, she began watching German cartoons on streaming sites and picking up German books for kids at bookstores. Anthony and I just supported her interests. It seems my daughter, naturally interacting with my grandfather, became fluent enough to converse without a translator. Leo started to shiver. With anger as I explained. His face flushed with humiliation, unable to accept defeat from someone he looked down upon.
That's unbelievable. I'll complain to the organizers. My child has been unfairly judged.
He stormed back into the venue, leaving his child alone. Unable to leave his child unattended, I waited silently for him to return. Soon, 2 security guards escorted him out of the venue. He gritted his teeth, clearly upset by my daughter's victory. As he approached brazenly, a woman's voice unexpectedly called out to him.
Leo, what a coincidence to see you here.
The woman, wearing a neat pantsuit and a speech competition staff badge, caught his attention. With her arrival, he calmed his anger and tensed up. Unable to leave, I stood there with my daughter hidden behind me, watching the scene.
Do you have a child, Leo? I heard you were single. Is she your wife?
I shook my head to her unexpected question.
No, he's my ex-husband. Then, is this child yours and Leo's?
She eyed the boy standing beside Leo.
No, that's his child with the woman he married after our divorce.
Her eyes sharpened. Leo, pale and sweating, couldn't hide his shock. The aftermath was predictable. Sensing trouble, I quickly left the scene. Turns out, Leo, after marrying a college graduate, had been falsely claiming to be single and was involved with a woman who graduated from a prestigious foreign university. She was involved in organizing the speech competition and realized she was the other woman when she saw him with his child. His wife's fury over the affair exploded. The next day, she took their child and returned to her parents' home. Now, Leo is burdened with child support until his child reaches adulthood, compensation for the affair, and education loan payments. Rumors spread uncontrollably, revealing his pattern of switching women based on their education, leading to his forced resignation. My daughter later participated in a national German speech competition. Though she didn't win, her near-native proficiency drew attention, deepening her interest in German. Encouraged by Anthony, I left the trading company. And now, I started a German language school at home, also assisting my grandfather with novel translations.